Progress Report, perspective and news progressives can use. I'm your host, Ron Rivers. Today is August 30th, 2019, and we have a lot to discuss today about the last week in review. On our agenda for today is the burning of the Amazon, the Democratic primary race, Bernie Sanders' new labor plan he just put forth, the expungement of marijuana convictions, and new technology breakthroughs that you should know about. We'll dive right into it with our biggest crisis first. The burning of the Amazon presents us with frankly a fundamental problem for the world, one that is by its very nature constrained by the ideals of the past. Essentially, we have this nation-state dominion. We have Brazil having a large swath of the Amazon rainforest within their borders, conflicting with just global well-being, the survival of all of us. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The burning and clearing of the Amazon, which has been going on for a long time, is terrible news for a planet in climate catastrophe. Now, the challenge, too, with the Amazon rainforest is it's very much economic for the farmers. And I think this is a lot of things that we really run into this kind of conflict of why is this happening, right? Why would people in a day of absolute climate catastrophe be essentially just burning down the rainforest, the lungs of the planet, to clear room for cattle grazing? It really presents a fundamental problem for the world, and it's one by nature that is constrained by the ideals of the past. And when I say that, I mean essentially you have a nation state, Brazil, that has this level of autonomy, level of sovereignty, and claims dominion over the rainforest, despite it being a direct conflict with our global well-being. It's putting the profits of these cattle ranchers and the Brazilian beef industry, which is the largest exporter of beef in the world, ahead of all of us, ahead of our well-being. And as of yesterday, August 29th, 2019, Brazilian President Bolsonaro did sign a 60-day ban on new clearings for the Amazon. But the damage has already been done pretty tremendously with these latest fires that have been pretty much going out of control. And there's also fires going on actually in Africa as well. So, this is a topic that is kind of near and dear to all of us because at the end of the day, if the Amazon goes, it is without a doubt catastrophe for the earth. And of course, our leadership, President Trump, he responded by allowing for Alaskan logging, so cutting down our forests and pine reserves here. The Amazon topic specifically is something that's on everyone's mind. On Tuesday, we'll be releasing a Progressive Perspective episode, a deep dive into what it would look like if we had a progressive White House at this very moment and what they'd be doing to mitigate the Amazonian crisis. Many of us feel powerless in this scenario, and it's no surprise. But what we find when you do a little bit of research is the cattle ranchers themselves are very rural, very poor, and essentially their argument is, look, I have to feed my family, right? I can't live in the trees. This is how I make my living. So it's something to keep in mind as we explore this. As progressives, I think it's a really critical aspect of dealing with problems in the world is less confrontational, more collaborative, more cooperative. So when we think about these needs and we recognize that at the end of the day, all of our problems always stem from people, whether that's people like President Trump, President Bolsonaro, or these super rural farmers who are just trying to make ends meet. And again, I'll talk more about that next week, but I believe they make about $8,500 US dollars per year. So it's not like they're living well, but beef production is a big part of the Brazilian economy, and that's why this land is being cleared. So it's something to keep in mind. Now, this obviously doesn't take into account the slaughtering of the Amazon tribes, right? These tribes have been very vocal in the past about these ranchers come in and they just kill them like they're subspecies. So it really reflects, the Amazon burning really reflects on really culture and humanity as a whole and kind of where our priorities are and how we are trying to break free from this old way of doing things, because the old way is unsustainable, but so many parts of the world, including here in the United States, are not ready for transcendence, or I should say are not willing to transcend, are not willing to do the work necessary to go beyond where we are. And primary to that is not destroying the planet. Moving on to the Democratic primary, we had Kirsten Gillibrand drop out of the race, which is really a shame. She didn't make the debate, and the debates are kind of a whole other thing. The DNC kind of keeps moving the goalposts with these debates, and I think that's really unfortunate. I think the entire format If you guys are like me, I find the entire format almost depressing. It's not a debate. It is a bunch of sound bites, and really I would imagine that as we transform the Democratic Party, or a new party arises, we want to make sure that genuine debates are part of that, genuine contests of ideas. That we could have done a tournament style bracket. It would have been much better to have the candidates really go at it and then kind of vote in mini blocks to see who could move forward. Kristen dropping out of the race is kind of a shame, because although she wasn't my preferred candidate, I think she had some really good election reform ideas, and that's something I'm personally very passionate about. I've talked a lot about within the local progressives in my community, in my state. I'm a staunch believer that the primary path of the progressive should be election reform, and I always compare it to a vehicle. Right? So essentially, if right now the modern day elections are run in a way, it's almost like a horse and buggy. I'm saying we should build a bullet train. We should build electric cars. We should stop riding around the horse and buggy and expecting things to change, and start really collaboratively focusing our efforts on reforming our elections. And Senator Gillibrand did do that. Now, her plan was about, she wanted to give everyone $600 to donate to their favorite candidates, essentially publicly funded elections. Where her plan failed, and I'm surprised it failed, but it ultimately didn't address the big money in politics issues created by Citizens United. So I think she had some strong points to kind of level the playing field a bit, but she should have been more staunch about just adding a constitutional amendment to remove Citizens United from our elections. Speaking of the debates as well, Tulsi Gabbard is unqualified for this debate. And both Senator Gillibrand and Tulsi Gabbard are essentially symptoms of a larger problem, right? This is an organization that has had a pick in mind from the beginning. That pick is Joe Biden. It is becoming more and more apparent as time goes on that Joe Biden is not the ideal choice. He's simply not qualified for the transition and the transformational thinking that we need. The idea that centrism is a way forward is frankly a false ideal, right? There's no neutral vision of the good. Every decision we make policy-wise pushes us towards one direction or another. So neutrality is not a real thing in politics. Everything pushes us in a direction. And anyone who's arguing for centrist policies is essentially arguing for the maintaining of the oligarchical structure that we now have. It is a shame that both of these candidates won't be on the debate stage. Tulsi Gabbard is still in the race, as far as I know at this time. But it's, again, election reform, the way we choose our candidates, the way we present our candidates. As progressives, we have to be the heralds of this new way of doing things. And it has to start with us in our local elections, in our local clubs, our local town progressive groups, and just building the habit of contests of ideas, allowing people to be a part of it, and really challenging one another to be better, which the current DNC debates do not do. Moving on, Bernie Sanders received the first major union endorsement from the United Electrical Workers. A 35,000-member organization has formally introduced Bernie Sanders, and that's a pretty exciting topic for Bernie. It's a pretty exciting win. He recently announced a plan to strengthen labor unions because, and I'm just going to read directly from his website, when workers become interested in forming unions, 75% of private sector employees hire outside consultants to run anti-union campaigns. 63% force employees to attend closed-door meetings to hear anti-union propaganda. 54% of employers threaten workers in such meetings. An employee who engaged in union organizing campaigns has a 1 in 5 chance of getting fired, and nearly 60% of employers threaten to close or relocate their businesses if workers elect to form a union. And even when workers overcome these enormous obstacles and win union elections, more than half of workers who vote to form a union don't have a union contract a year later, and 37% still do not have a first contract 2 years after the election due to loopholes in the labor laws. Now, I'm going to link to Bernie's full plan below in the description, but he's essentially committed to moving the right to work, which is a code word, if you're not familiar, where employers can fire you for anything, including attempting to form a union. I believe that right now 27 states have right to work, so it essentially really diminishes the power of labor. He wants to guarantee the right to unionize for all workers and expand union efforts nationally, networking unions deeper together and bargaining not on a company-wide basis, but rather on national standards. And to also give federal workers the right to unionize. And there's a lot more. Overall, I think it's a great plan, but from the progressive perspective, I think it could be better. I think one of the challenges with unions in general, not unions in the concept, but the challenges that unions are facing today, is that the nature of work is changing in the U.S. And it's going to continue to do so. And I've spoken a lot about this and written a lot about this, specifically about the transformation to the knowledge economy. Again, a lot of it's pulled from Roberto Mangiapane-Unger's work, and it's all publicly available. But the problem that many of these unions will face over time is automation. Now, not all of them. Some of the work is highly technical, and we will need humans for some time. But over time, more and more of the manual labor will become automated. Not only that, but the most advanced form of production in terms of, when I say most advanced, it's the highest output for inputs, but also the ability to maintain monopoly because R&D and imagination and creativity are part of the structure of the organization, is now becoming the most productive form of work here in the United States. So a lot of manual labor, especially any sort of factory or assembly line labor, is just frankly not where the investments are going in the United States and not where they're going to go, because automation will really radically change that. So given that we know labor is going to have a tough time, I would have liked to see deeper investments in empowering unions to have access to lifetime retraining and restructuring in a lot of different directions. I understand that unions are about a specific trade, but what happens when specific trades become completely automated? As progressives, we're not sticking our head in the sand, right? We seek radical truth. That's something we need to be aware of as progressives, because that's something we're going to face within many of our lifetimes. And if not handled proactively, right, it'll be handled by crisis. And that's kind of how change happens in the United States. It's always crisis and then action, crisis and action. The goal of the progressives is to create a society where transformation can happen without crisis, proactively, right? And that's what we want to do. On top of what I've just talked about, I would have liked to see a pathway for gig economy workers to begin to unionize and allowing the government to kind of build the foundational structure for that. Not just companies like Uber, by the way, which is a whole other example, but also freelance careers like graphic design and web design. Now, I'm going to say it up front because I like to criticize myself and point out holes in my own arguments, is that unionizing these freelance workers presents genuine challenges because a lot of freelance, for example, graphic designers, are competing with international laborers in the same marketplaces. Like, for example, if you ever go on Upwork, there's a lot of quality of work there, a lot of different variations, and there are international workers competing with U.S. workers. Of course, you can select U.S. workers. I typically do for my project. Nothing against our foreign workers, but just keeping it local. And so these are things that, as we kind of transcend into this more quote-unquote gig economy, a gig economy is just an excuse for the people at the very top of the pyramid to collect more wealth while not giving the people at the bottom and the middle the benefits and structure and foundation that they really deserve. So make sure you check out Bernie's plan. I think it was pretty good, pretty strong. I'm going to check out some other labor plans for this week, see what happens next week, and hopefully we'll have some or the other Democratic candidates talking about their plans for labor in the future as well. I didn't mention it initially, but there's a new report from the International Institute of Sustainable Development I wanted to share with everyone. It estimates the cost of subsidizing a full transition to clean energy. And it comes out with a figure that's only 10 to 30% of the subsidy presently given to fossil fuel companies. So essentially what I'm saying is green energy is cheaper. So to be clear, this study shows that if we took 30% of the subsidies, only 30 that we gave to oil and gas companies, and diverted it into new green energy infrastructure, a mobilized effort, that would be enough. We'd still have 70% left over, which allows me to just imagine that, hey, what if we took 50% of those subsidies, 60, 70% of those subsidies? What kind of effort could we do with a mobilized effort? How many jobs could we create? Well-paying jobs that involve government training programs. How could we restart the American economy, break free from the stagnation with a new direction, and pulling our money from these fossil fuel companies? Of course, as always, the problem with this transition, this transformation, is the cowardice of Congress and the cowardice of our state representatives as well. You know, at the end of the day, there are good representatives in probably every state, but there are a lot of bad ones. There are a lot of bad actors who essentially are playing the politics of 30 years ago, not recognizing that it is time for a change, but because of their entrenched power structures, because of their corporate backing and the capital they have access to, it is tough for new challengers to get in there. But it's not stopping people. We have a ton of progressive candidates running for a lot of different offices, both here in my home state of New Jersey and throughout the nation. So if you're not aware, be sure you're checking out your progressive options. There's probably many candidates. I was personally endorsed by Our Revolution National in my Democratic primary race here in New Jersey. And you can count on those candidates to be excellent. Justice Democrats, you check out those websites. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that even if you're not super involved in politics, we are making the transformation. We are getting the new generation of thinkers and leaders in there who are going to bring new perspective and, most importantly, not be beholden to corporate masters, not be beholden to political bosses. That's a huge problem we have here in New Jersey. So just making sure that we're constantly on the lookout for that, because again, and I'll link this report in the bottom, you can check it out for yourself, but that report came out, and so it's cheaper and it's necessary. We need to make the move to green energy now. Moving on from green energy, I want to share with you some news about Code for America in the state of Illinois. I'm very excited about this. So the state of Illinois is legalizing marijuana, and Code for America is a nonprofit based out of California. It's run by the CEO's, I believe her name is Jennifer Palka. And so what Code for America does, it works with governments, local, state, and provides services for free. What they're doing is they've developed an algorithm to essentially expunge tens of thousands of marijuana conviction records in the state of Illinois to go along with the legalization, essentially making it right. And it's free for the state. It is a phenomenal organization. I suggest you check it out. If you're someone with the access to capital to donate, you should certainly donate to their cause. A personal story, when I ran for office here for State Assembly in New Jersey, I had actually a very detailed plan as part of my platform to use Code for America in New Jersey to develop a free election campaign platform. In 2017, I founded a nonprofit called Our Society. We built an MVP for a free election campaign platform for local candidates, and it was really popular in the state. Over 10,000 people saw it. We had 18 candidates. It was a very small, closed beta, but the idea is we wanted to bring politics directly to consumers, right? P2C, and using Code for America was in our plan. So I'm so excited to see the work they're doing. And it was, bravo to Illinois for not only legalizing marijuana, following the will for the people, right, not letting politics get in the way as it's happening here in New Jersey, but also doing right by the people wronged by the law and using technology to do it in the most efficient and seamless way possible. I mean, it's really just a brilliant idea and something that every state could learn from. And finally, in our weekly progress reports, I always want to make sure I'm sharing science and technology breakthroughs with you. As progressives, it's important that we are very aware of what is going on in terms of the exponential growth of our society, our technology, because all of that impacts our culture and what is possible. So today's science breakthrough, the first chip made with carbon nanotubes instead of silicon was created. It's a new microprocessor. And the transistors, which are tiny like electrical switches that essentially perform computations on and off, are made with carbon nanotubes rather than silicone. Now, based on the power and speed of this new breakthrough, the current chip, the one they just invented, is about as powerful as a silicone chip from the 80s. So not that powerful, right? It's not ready for use. It's not something we're going to be going with. But it's important not to dismiss these breakthroughs because in principle, carbon nanotube processors can run 3 times faster while consuming about a third of the energy from their silicone predecessors. That's according to Max Shulakar from MIT. So this is huge because it allows us to understand that the next generation of processors, the next generation of speed of information, speed of communication is already being invented. It's already something we can do. And right? Carbon nanotubes versus silicone. And I think, again, as progressives, it's always really critical for us to be up on the latest technology for public investments, right? Thinking about long-term plans and future policies, and just understanding where we are going. Every week, I'll be sure to share with you some latest, greatest advancements. There's too many to really cover in one podcast. I'm always going to make sure our weekly progress report includes some of the latest technological breakthroughs from the previous week. So that wraps up this week's progress report. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, my name is Ron Rivers. And guys, if you like the show today, please be sure to subscribe and share with your friends. The more we can network progressives together, the more we can talk about a wide range of topics, the more we can keep each other informed about what's going on, the better our movement will be. If you have questions about anything we talked about, you want to check out any of the sources, you can look about that below. Any comments or your feedback's always welcome. But again, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. And thanks again for tuning in to the Progressive Perspectives Weekly Progress Report.